defending the homeland. And thank you, veterans. Happy Veterans Day. And the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer. Welcome, everyone. This podcast is called Defending America. And today is Veterans Day. I want to thank all veterans very, very much. In particular, I want to thank my brother. He's the one veteran that I probably know the best. He went to NAPS, which is the Naval Academy Preparatory School. And we went to a very, very crummy high school. To be honest with you, it's a public high school in a poor area and middle-class area. And the high school is probably worse today than it was even then, even though that's hard to believe. In any event, he somehow managed to get up and out as the oldest in our family and was appointed eventually to the United States Naval Academy. So thank you to my brother for serving his country, and thank you to all veterans. So first up, podcast listeners, DeSantis, the governor of Florida, is defending Florida against basically an out-of-control federal government. And this is what you would expect a governor to do. You would expect a governor to defend his state when you have a federal government that is attacking the citizens of your state and attacking your state. Not all, of course, governors care to do that. But this particular governor, Governor DeSantis, does. And how is he defending his state? Well, the governor was at a press conference in Florida, and the press conference dealt specifically with the migrants, otherwise known as illegal immigrants. Notice how the media, by the way, keeps calling them migrants. They actually are illegal immigrants. Okay, if you have borders, they are illegal immigrants. And those illegal immigrants are being relocated by the federal government without notice in cities all over the country, and in this particular case, in Florida. And as you know, one such illegal immigrant posed as a minor, in other words, as a child, and said he was 17, a very nice and willing family brought him in, and he ended up murdering the dad who brought him into the house. And so herein lies the problem when you have a federal government that does not believe in borders and does not believe in states' rights. Ladies and gentlemen, DeSantis had this press conference, and as he's speaking in the press conference, he's asked the question about what is happening in Florida. Like, where are these people being relocated to in Florida? Who's putting them up? How are they affording to stay in the state of Florida? Where are they living? Are they living on the street? Are they being put up somewhere? And DeSantis first answers one question and says, well, you know, we're not even being told by the federal government that these individuals are coming or when they're coming to our state and where they're being put. He said, you know how we're finding out? Because individuals who are federal employees, most likely by Homeland Security and others, in other words, patriots in Homeland Security who love this country, are calling his administration and others, maybe mayors of cities in Florida, and saying, hey, guess what? We are sending plane loads full of or bus loads full of illegal immigrants to these particular places in Florida. So these are patriots in the Department of Homeland Security. And podcast listeners, if you think for one moment that we don't live in a post-constitutional America, we are in a post-constitutional America. This administration and the Obama administration have shredded our Constitution. And let's face it, this is the third term of the Obama administration. Joe Biden is not in charge. So DeSantis is asked the question, and we have 4 clips in this press conference, and it ends up being pretty comical, but also very serious at the same time, because it goes to the best way for red state governors to stop this insanity. So first up, here's the question from the reporter, and we have the DeSantis responses. Here we go. Here's a clip.
Yes, ma'am.
Governor, we wanted to ask
you about a story that's been of interest to a lot of our viewers, these migrant flights to the Jacksonville area. Your spokesperson told us your office is aware of 78 such flights in recent months. She says state law enforcement has briefed the office about this. Which law enforcement agency is that? And can you provide specifics about these flights, when they landed, who was on board, how many?
So good. So here's what happens with these flights. There's no notification to the state of Florida. These are done mostly in the middle of the night, and it's clandestine, and we really have no say into it. So what we're going to do, so I don't know on the top of my head everything, but we could provide. I know when we initially got wind of this, it wasn't through normal channels. It's people in the federal government who are effectively leaking this to us so that we have a heads up on it.
Yeah, so we have DeSantis saying, which is something that most people don't even know. They just assume that when people cross into the United States illegally, and then you have a federal government who is, instead of turning them back and sending them home, busing them and transporting them by plane into the interior of the United States, you would assume, as a courtesy, the federal government would notify the governors of the states of where these individuals are going. The federal government isn't doing that, as DeSantis said. So you have reporters. I mean, this reporter wasn't particularly hostile, at least it didn't seem so. But there are many other reporters who are saying to the Republican governors in particular, why don't you know where these people are going? What are you doing to help them? And it's like, the federal government is not telling us anything. We are living in a post-constitutional United States. We have a federal government that is putting the interests of illegal aliens ahead of the safety and security of the American people. And so here is DeSantis saying it the way it is. This is a payoff for future voters. He's saying it in his own way. We have that clip, and here it is.
We're going to get together and figure out what we can do in the immediate term to protect folks in Florida. And then obviously, as the legislature comes back, I think about it, you have an open border in violation of U.S. law. The president has said that basically they want to even pay reparations to people who came illegally. Just think about that. You as an American, you get higher gas prices. You get higher grocery bills. You get told basically to just grin and bear it. Someone breaks the law, comes illegally, and they're going to cut them a check for hundreds of thousands of dollars. That is just unbelievable.
Yeah, so reparations to illegals. And it just doesn't stop there. I mean, they also get walking around money when they come into the United States, especially when they're caught, which DeSantis is going to cover in the next clip. But in the clip that you just heard, he's like, yeah, we're basically paying reparations and paying off future voters of the Democrat Party who are here illegally, welcoming them, giving them money. Of course, they will forever vote Democrat because they'll know who gave them all of that money. And at the same time, not letting the governors know that they're here. We don't know who they are. We're not respecting the fact that we have a border. So here are some of the perverse incentives for illegals to get caught. DeSantis covers that next. You just won't believe it. We have that clip, and here it is.
It's interesting. If you're trying to deter kind of illegal migration in the interior of the country, if you come illegally and they don't catch you, it's actually in some respects worse than if they catch you, because when they catch you, they'll give you money or potentially put you on a conveyance to get you somewhere, whereas if they don't catch you, you're kind of on your own and you don't necessarily get any money from the government and everything. Really, really perverse incentive.
Yeah, so let's explain that a little bit. So you're an illegal alien. You're running across the border and you see the Department of Homeland Security and other law enforcement, maybe the Texas National Guard and others there protecting the border. You run across the border, you somehow manage to evade them, and you start to work your way into the interior of the country. Maybe you hop on a train illegally, like a cargo train, or maybe you hitchhike, maybe you walk. Well, you end up getting to your destination on your own, and you don't get any money for it. But if you are an illegal alien who runs across the border and you get caught, the Biden administration's Department of Homeland Security, and they basically say, here's some money, here's some walk around money, and we're going to take you to the interior of the country. Do you know anyone in the United States? Which city? That's where we're going to send you. Here's some walk around money. In other words, welcome to the United States of America. Please vote Democrat for the rest of your life. Of course, you're not a citizen, but don't worry. We're going to take care of that soon enough when we control all of the United States Congress and stack the Supreme Court. It's exactly what they're up to. They've been up to this for a long time. We know why, but the difference, podcast listeners, is here is a governor in the United States of America who's trying to protect the citizens of his state from an all-powerful, out-of-control, post-constitutional federal government. And he's able to articulate his feelings and his vision and what is actually happening. So then the reporter asks, this is the final clip of this series, the reporter asks how many flights are coming into the U.S., into Florida, and where? As if the governor even knows, right? If you have a federal government that is not telling the governors where these flights and buses are going, why would you ask a governor, where are they going? Why wouldn't you ask the president of the United States? He's the one that's supposed to know. Why wouldn't you ask the Secretary of Homeland Security? Why wouldn't you ask individual ICE agents who, of course, can't talk to the press because they'll get fired if they tell the press exactly what's happening? But it doesn't stop the reporters from asking these incredibly stupid questions as if governors are supposed to know, because everybody understands the Democrats are terrified of DeSantis. Terrified. And if they want to do anything, that is, they would love to see Florida be destroyed. I mean, let's face it, that's what Democrats are really good at. They've done a great job in New York City and Baltimore and pretty much most every major blue city. So here's this final clip. Here's the reporter, and we have DeSantis's hysterical response. And I fully endorse his response. Here's the clip.
If I may follow up again, which law enforcement agencies are providing this information, and do you have any details about the number of flights, when, the number of people?
So in terms of like each individual flight, I mean, I can tell you, I know that they started in May, and I know that they've continued. Whether they have the ledger of everything, I mean, you'd have to talk to my office about that. But our state law enforcement agencies are engaged in this. And again, this is not something that we're given ahead of time. This is something that we find out after the fact. And I talked to the folks at the Jacksonville Aviation Authority. Feds come in, they do it, they got a bus. You know, my view would be, why don't we, if they're going to come here, you know, we'll provide buses and provide them. I will send them to Delaware and do that. I mean, if he's not going to support the border being secured, then he should be able to have everyone there.
So there's the solution. So first, the reporter asks, how many flights and where are the flights going? And who in law enforcement and what law enforcement is telling you where those flights are going and where? In other words, the reporter is trying to get the governor of Florida to snitch on the patriots who work within the government so that I'm sure they can be exposed and pushed out of government. So obviously DeSantis didn't do that. He didn't fall for it, but it's clear what was trying. I'm not sure if you caught that subtlety, but it was quite a subtlety. So who in law enforcement is telling you all this information? In other words, they should not be telling you as a governor what is happening at the border and where these individuals are being sent to your state. And then DeSantis says, you know, maybe what we should do, because we could do this. In fact, there's nothing stopping Florida from doing this. And that is rounding up these illegal aliens, putting them in buses and busing them to Delaware. And why Delaware? Because that is where Joe Biden is originally from. And that's where Joe Biden has at least a couple of houses that I'm aware of, one of which is in Bethany Beach, Delaware, which is right on the ocean. And if you know anything about Bethany Beach, Delaware, I mean, homes that are in the millions of dollars. And it's a beautiful area. It is. Beautiful area. But this guy has a home that appears to be right on the ocean, single family home, which I'm sure is worth in the millions. And so DeSantis is like, well, let's send these illegal aliens, bust them to Delaware. But Delaware isn't just good enough. Let's bust them, my opinion. Let's bust them to Bethany Beach. Let's drop them off right in front of Joe Biden's house. Now, I'm not suggesting that we tell these individuals to, break into Joe Biden's house, because as you know, Joe Biden just had a fence built around his house in Bethany. A border wall. He had a border wall built around his house. So even if these individuals, hundreds of them, probably, I'm sure in Florida, would be many thousands of illegal aliens, were dropped off in front of Joe Biden's house, they probably would be shot if they tried to climb the wall, because naturally the Secret Service is there. The Secret Service made sure, in probably cooperation with Homeland Security, that this nice big security gate and fence was built around Joe Biden's $1 million mansion in Bethany Beach on the ocean. So why not do that? Why not also send, by that, I mean, why not bust them there anyway? Why not also bust these individuals to Martha's Vineyard, where Obama lives, and drop them off in front of Obama's house? Why not? Why not do that? Why don't we drop them off to all of the elite areas where all of the progressive elites, and also, by the way, who happen to be white, which I find hysterical, right? They live in these white enclaves that are just super rich, like Nancy Pelosi, and they all have security fences and security gates and walls. It's just incredible. So, yes, we are living in a post-constitutional America, and that particular press conference just illuminates how post-constitutional we are at this particular point in the time. That's why we're calling this podcast Defending the Homeland. And thank you, veterans, because it may get to the point, and I'm pretty sure we're already there, where we need veterans to not just defend the homeland overseas as they have traditionally done, but maybe to start defending the homeland at home. It's really kind of where we are. And I know probably what you're saying is well, Mark, we can't take up arms. We can't protect ourselves because, that would create a civil war. I'm not suggesting a civil war, podcast listeners. I'm not. But I am saying this: the Biden administration and the Obama administration, and as I said, this is the third term of the Obama administration, they are setting up the American citizens, the law-abiding citizens, so that the law-abiding citizens at some point are going to say, you know what, I have no choice. I have no choice but to do what is necessary to protect my great country, because these individuals don't believe and aren't following the Constitution of the United States and aren't following the laws. Case in point, podcast listeners, the Biden administration is amassing records of some 54 million gun owners. So in the Federalist, an online newspaper, the Biden administration stockpiles more than 55 million gun owner records amid a Second Amendment crackdown. The Biden administration is using the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives to collect and store millions of gun owners' records that could be used to swiftly carry out President Joe Biden's anti-Second Amendment wishes, the Washington Free Beacon reported. According to the documents obtained by the Free Beacon, Biden's ATF collected 54.7 million out-of-business paper records. So in other words, they went to the businesses that sell guns and got their records, and 887,000 electronic records detailing gun transactions and other private firearm information in the 2021 fiscal year alone. These records are reportedly kept in a federal warehouse managed by the ATF in West Virginia. The large-scale stockpiling not only signals the Biden administration's eagerness to crack down on gun owners across the nation, but also concern gun store owners that the ATF is overstepping its bounds by creating a federal database recording gun owner information. The creation of a national directory is strictly prohibited under the Firearms Owners Protection Act of 1986. That's a law. But an ATF spokesman claimed to the Free Beacon that, quote, those out-of-business records do not constitute an initiation or continuation, of any federal gun registry. In other words, the ATF is saying, well, because we're collecting this information from the businesses that sell the guns, it is not a violation of the Firearms Owners Protection Act of 1986. Of course, it's a violation. And yes, we are living in a post-constitutional America. While gun shops are required under the Gun Control Act of 1968 to turn over their records to the ATF when they go out of business, they are not required to keep their reports beyond a 20-year period. The Biden administration and anti-gun groups, however, want to change that and are largely in favor of heavier federal oversight that mandates a digitized registry that can be searched. If a national database is created, thousands of gun owners could be sought out by the administration to register or destroy any firearms or related equipment that the Democrat administration seeks to restrict or even ban. And that was written by Jordan Davidson, a staff writer at the Federalist. And so this information has even gotten to England in the Daily Mail. Same thing. Biden administration has amassed records of 54 million gun owners in 2021 during a new crackdown on firearm owners, the report claims. Very similar article. Obviously, the breaking news came from the Washington Beacon. So I'm just curious, podcast listeners. We have people who are being let into the United States, illegal aliens. They're being paid when they're caught and then transported into the interior of the country. We have people that came in under the Trump administration, and they could be receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars retroactively. And then you have these individuals in your community. You're trying to protect your house, not just from them, and obviously not all of them are bad. We know that. But you're just trying to protect your property, and you're trying to protect your family, okay? And we've already had one murder by one of these individuals. And then you have the administration saying, you know what? You white supremacists, you gun owners, you're actually the problem. We, the government, which is acting in a post-constitutional way and completely and utterly ignoring the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution, you guys, you white supremacists, you gun owners, you're the problem. You're the problem. You are the ones who are living in a post-constitutional America. We're not doing that. We're the federal government. And so this reminds me very similarly to what happened in the state of Maryland. I mean, of course, Maryland is terribly anti-Second Amendment. Most people who know blue states like Maryland and California and Illinois know that these places are vehemently anti-Second Amendment. But who thought that the federal government would actually undermine the Second Amendment and prepare for what appears to me to be, at some point, a massive gun confiscation program? Because why else would you collect the records? But in Maryland, they were trying to amass records of electricity usage. Government. They wanted to pass a bill, didn't pass, but it came close. How many kilowatts do you use per month? How many kilowatt hours of electricity do you use per month? And then the purpose was to determine in the same bill what your carbon footprint was so that they could eventually either tax you on your carbon footprint or limit your carbon footprint. Kind of like a social credit score in China. Exact same thing. And if you think for one moment, podcast listeners, that what I'm saying to you, that we're living in a post-constitutional America, if you think for one moment that what I'm saying is in any way incorrect, Just watch any part of the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. A guy who protected himself from being murdered by lawlessness in 2020. The same lawlessness that the governments refused to crack down on. They just let the looting, the burning, and the murdering occur. And then the good guy with the gun is the one that's being prosecuted. And the bad guys with the gun, well, they're fine. They're okay. They're safe. Don't need to worry about that. And so here is proof. Hakeem Jeffries, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, a nut job left-wing congressman, tweeted out that we should lock up Kyle Rittenhouse and throw away the key. This was just recent, of course, despite what you have seen in the trial, despite the fact that this gentleman should never be prosecuted, should never be in this situation, despite the fact that there's an ongoing trial and you have a member of the United States Congress saying, you know, the good guy with the gun, throw him in jail. But the looters and the rioters and the people that perpetrated violence, they are just fine and should go free. So the House Democrat caucus chair slammed for tweeting, lock up Kyle Rittenhouse after taking anti-prison stance. So Democrat Representative Hakeem Jeffries was widely panned on social media after calling for 18-year-old alleged Kenosha shooter Kyle Rittenhouse to be jailed while his trial is still pending. Lock up Kyle Rittenhouse and throw away the key, Congressman Jeffries tweeted, as the alleged shooter's trial was airing live on television, causing many on social media to question whether it was appropriate for an elected official to risk tainting the jury pool by speaking out during a trial. You think? A sitting member of Congress and chair of House Democratic Caucus, the Spectator editor Stephen L. Miller tweeted, basically said, lock up Kyle Rittenhouse and throw away the key. Others pointed out a tweet from Jeffries in 2020, where he called for the end of mass incarceration and the defunding of the prison industrial complex, but now is calling for Rittenhouse to be jailed forever during a trial. I got to read this again. So others pointed out a tweet from Jeffries in 2020. This is Congressman Jeffries, where the congressman called for an end of mass incarceration, you know, a Democrat progressive talking point, and the defunding of the prison industrial complex. But now this same Congressman Jeffries is calling for Rittenhouse to be jailed forever during a trial. Yes, podcast listeners, we are living in a post-constitutional America because these individuals do not believe in the Constitution. They don't believe in the fact that you are innocent until proven guilty, and they don't believe in your right to bear arms. They don't believe in the Second Amendment, and we know they don't believe in the First Amendment. LeBron James was ripped for mocking Kyle Rittenhouse because Kyle Rittenhouse was crying in court. So hoops legend LeBron James, this is in the New York Post, is being ripped for mocking teenager Kyle Rittenhouse as Rittenhouse was crying on the stand. The 36-year-old Lakers star posted a series of laughing emojis alongside footage of the 18-year-old Kenosha gunman overwhelmed by sobs Wednesday, a breakdown that forced a halt to his trial. What tears? Question marks. I didn't see one, wrote James, a vocal black rights activist. Quote, man, knock it off. The boy ate some lemon heads before walking into court, the Los Angeles baller wrote on his @KingJames account, ending with 3 laughing emojis. Can you imagine? Within hours, his tweet had more than 17,000 comments, many outraged at the latest outburst by the player who previously tweeted a photo of a cop along with the caption, You're next. This is LeBron James who did this. Quote, LeBron James appears to be mocking people dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder in his post. Why? Asked Aaron Carpenter, a local counselor in Ohio. Is this a joke to you? Not a good look. Others asked why the athlete is on the wrong side of every issue. Quote, when you revisit traumatic memories, it comes out differently emotionally and or physically, Harminder Singh wrote of Rittenhouse, whose sobs came as he recalled the fearing of his life from Black Lives Matter rioters who testified were trying to snatch his AR-15 before he opened fire. And what's really funny, well, first of all, those tweets aren't funny, but what is funny is LeBron James was blasted also because he cried when he was on the court because he got a cramp in his leg. So this is from Daily Wire. So NBA basketball player LeBron James was mocked online following his decision to mock Kyle Rittenhouse on Wednesday after Rittenhouse cried while testifying in court. Notable responses to James' tweeted include Ben Shapiro, the Daily Wire, quote, LeBron, great defender of the Chinese government's tyranny, also happens to be an unparalleled dumpster fire in the field of criminal justice. And then Stephen Miller said he's crying because he had to shoot someone and take a life in self-defense, which is just a joke because there's a picture of LeBron being carried off of the court and Stephen Miller is just making fun of him like, you know, he's this big hero. And he said, yeah, you cried because you got a cramp on the court. This gentleman, Rittenhouse, cried because he actually was going to be murdered by the BLM protesters and the rest of the crazy protesters and so forth. So meanwhile, Rittenhouse, his defense, asks for a mistrial with prejudice. I'm going to explain what that means briefly. So following a lunch break, the defense team for Kyle Rittenhouse asked Judge Bruce Schroeder for a mistrial with prejudice, which, if granted, would effectively dismiss the case permanently. And I'm sure you've seen many other snippets on this. We're not going to spend a lot more time on that particular trial, other than to say this. We started out talking about illegal immigration in the United States, and we talked about how DeSantis is defending Florida. And we've talked about how the Biden administration is amassing records of some 54 to 55 million gun owners and putting that information in a database because somehow the gun owners are dangerous. And this is antithetical to the Constitution and the Second Amendment. And then we're talking about how Kyle Rittenhouse is the bad guy because he used a gun to protect himself against the rioters because the police were told to stand down by the failed elected officials who thought it was better to just let the BLM protesters riot. And so the good guy is potentially going to go to jail, and the bad guys, oh, they're all free. They're fine. And then you have all the virtue signaling people like LeBron James and so many others, and Hakeem Jeffries. So next up, podcast listeners, CNN says critical race theory is not in schools. You know what? We got to set this up. Look, for a year, CNN has said critical race theory is necessary. And teaching children critical race theory is absolutely essential. This is what CNN said on MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC. Then there's an election in Virginia, and Glenn Youngkin defeats a very powerful dynasty, the Clinton dynasty, which is Terry McAuliffe, very much part of the Clinton dynasty, on that issue, on the issue of giving parents the right to determine what the curriculum will be in their kids' schools, giving the parents a say in those schools, and stopping the teaching of critical race theory. Glenn Youngkin will be the governor because he's won in the state of Virginia, and he will be he will be inaugurated and sworn in. And so, fast forward, now that that's happened, CNN's new talking points, CRT is not in schools. I don't know how this network can even hire anyone. I don't know how anyone could even work for a network who does nothing but lie and does it so badly. So Brianna Kaler of CNN's New Day says CRT is not in schools. So she's interviewing, CNN's Brianna Kaler is interviewing Senator Rick Scott, a United States Senator from Florida, and she asks the senator a question and tries to basically say, yeah, well, you're all going to use the Trump, messages, and you're going to tie yourself to Trump, or you're going to try to untie yourself to Trump. Obviously, CNN's still stuck on Trump. Remember, CNN and MSNBC and ABC and CBS and NBC all tried to say again and again that Youngkin was a Trumper. And it didn't work. And it didn't work because while they were saying that, what they weren't doing is talking about policy. Youngkin was talking about policy, like critical race theory, like letting parents have a say in schools. And now, of course, CNN is saying CRT is not in schools. We have this epic interview by Brianna Kaler of CNN with Senator Rick Scott. It's wonderful. Listen closely. We have two clips. Here's the first clip.
The Virginia governor's race, is that the GOP playbook for the midterms, basically ignore Donald Trump?
Well, I hope the Democrats continue to do what Terry McAuliffe did. Terry McAuliffe ran his campaign. He did two things.
But you don't have control over that. You only have control over, say, the Glenn Youngkin in this case. So I'm asking you, as someone from the Republican perspective, because I'm pretty sure you're not advising Democratic candidates, is this the playbook for Republicans?
I think what Democrats are going to continue to do is talk about Donald Trump. I think Republicans are going to continue to talk about issues. Glenn Youngkin won his race because he talked about issues, and I think that's what's going to happen. What we're going to see is just like in Virginia, Terry McAuliffe wanted to say, "Oh, there was nothing about critical race theory." We know it's true. Parents know their kids are being indoctrinated with critical race theory in Virginia, and the Democrats wanted to deny it.
It's not in the curriculum.
Showed up because they don't like being lied to.
Just to be clear, it's not in the curriculum.
So, podcast listeners, can you believe that? That is the same Brianna Kaler of CNN who's been saying for a year that critical race theory is absolutely necessary to teach children, and it's because America is fundamentally an evil country and it's a horrible place, including in 2021. And suddenly, the Democrats get completely wiped out in the state of Virginia in the election that just occurred. And now CNN's Brianna Kaler is saying there is no CRT in public schools in Virginia. There is no CRT. There is no CRT. And so while she's saying this, she actually has a smirk on her face. I know you can't see this if you're not watching the podcast, if you're just listening. So she knows with a little smirk on her face that she's lying. And I have to ask the question, how do you get up every morning when you know that you have to lie all day on a network and try to convince your listeners that lies are actually the news? How is that helpful in advancing the American civic discussion? And so we have a second clip in this series where Rick Scott just completely pounds her to the ground about this whole CRT thing. And it just demonstrates to you either the CNN anchor is just really dumb, or maybe they just are hoping that the anti-Trump stuff, by talking about Trump, that's going to somehow carry the day because their policies are all failed policies. I'm not really sure. You make your own decision. Here's the second clip in this series. Here it is.
Brianna, would you like me to? Here, let me just read you a few things.
In
2015, while Terry McAuliffe was governor, the Virginia Department of Education promoted incorporating a critical race theory lens in education. You can still find it on the Department of Education's website, still there. In February 2019, a superintendent memo for the Virginia Department of Education promoted critical race theory and the idea of white fragility.
It's not
I
part
looked
of
at
the
it
curriculum.
yesterday. It's still there,
I do
Brianna.
want to ask you, just to be clear about
Brianna,
where
wait a
you
minute.
are.
Let's all agree. They were trying to indoctrinate kids. Terry McAuliffe denied it. It's still on the website. This is happening. And I hope Democrats continue to say it's not happening because parents are dumb.
So Senator Rick Scott is like, the CRT information is still on the state's education website. It's still there. And then you got the CNN anchor, Breonna Keller, saying, no, it's not being taught in the schools. It's just not. It's not. And this is just insane that you have CNN still in business. But what's scary about it is that there are actually people that believe this. And are those people equally dishonest, or are they just dumb? I'm not sure. Maybe it's just a combination. Maybe some of them are just outright evil. And I do believe at this particular point in time that Breonna Keller, by staying on CNN and promoting these lies, it's just pure, unadulterated evil that she's doing this. And so what was interesting is that is a CNN clip. But if you go on Rumble, there's a very end part of the clip that CNN conveniently got rid of. And that is where Breonna Keller of CNN says, well, Senator, did you just say parents are dumb? And of course, he didn't. He kind of slurs his words a little bit, Senator Rick Scott, when he talks, to be honest with you. And he goes, well, no, what I said was parents aren't dumb. So she tried to even plant words in his mouth by saying, so you said parents are dumb? I mean, it's Democrats that believe parents are dumb. It's Terry McAuliffe that believes that parents are dumb. But of course, she can't even ask that question. So next up, podcast listeners, we have good old Kamala Harris, who went to France to try to make things a little better. And with France, because, of course, the French government is still very upset with the fact that the United States decided to share submarine technology with Australia and England, and not France. And so there's a really hysterical article and a new term that's out there called Kamala vous français. So if you've ever noticed, it's not just Kamala Harris, but it's also Hillary Clinton, who decide to talk with an accent depending on wherever they are. You know, so if they're in the South, they talk with a Southern accent. You've heard Hillary many times. You've heard Kamala many times. So Kamala Harris is mocked for appearing to use a French accent during her Paris visit. This is in the New York Post. Vice President Harris has been mocked online for appearing to mimic the accent of her host country during a charm offensive aimed at shoring up relations with America's oldest ally. Harris affected what many described as a French accent while on a visit to a COVID-19 lab at Pasteur Institute in Paris on Tuesday, Fox News reported. Quote, one of the things people in politics and government should really take from the approach of scientists operate with a hypothesis. I love that, the Veep said. A hypothesis is well thought out. It's well planned. They start out with a hypothesis and then they test it out, knowing invariably that you're trying something for the first time. There will be glitches. There will be mistakes, she continued. Then everyone gets together. No one gets beat up about it. And you analyze it. What went wrong, reevaluate, update the hypothesis, and start again, Harris added before mocking how polls always stick to the plan. At that point, she seemed to switch to a French accent while using the phrase. Quote, in government, we campaign with the plan, she said. Uppercase T, uppercase P, the plan. And then the environment is such, we're expected to defend the plan even when the first time we roll it out, there may be some glitches and it's time to reevaluate and then do it again. Her linguistic lift didn't go unnoticed on social media. One said, is she using a French accent? I love this episode of Veep. That was said by Abigail Marone, press secretary for Senator Josh Hawley, Republican Missouri. There really are no words anymore. Au revoir, political columnist Joe Concha captioned a post from Political Action Committee America raising that included a clip of Harris addressing French scientists. So it's comme le vous français. And certainly understandable. Look, all it does is, podcast listeners, it just underscores the fact that this woman is so phony and she's so in over her head. We've all known people, right, who take on a job. Maybe it's even just a volunteer job, or maybe it's an actual job, and somehow they got it and they are in so over the head. They are so unprepared. And it's the equivalent of someone taking a job in an office where you have to write a lot and not understanding that you actually need to actually know how to write. And in this case, Chris is laughing at that. That's a pet peeve with me. In this case, you have a vice president of the United States where there's really no room for training. You need to be ready. You need to be ready for this job. You need to be ready to be president of the United States, especially with a Joe Biden in charge. And here we have someone who just demonstrates again and again that she is just so empty. There's nothing there. She really doesn't believe in anything. And she lacks substance to the point where you just like blow her off and you say, God, I just can't wait. Do I have to wait 4 years for this woman to go away? And same thing with Joe. Do I have to wait 4 years for Joe to go away too? And I think, unfortunately, the answer, at least at the moment, is yes, because that's the way our elections are. Next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer? Here it is. And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is misgendering the elderly. You heard that correctly. We've actually done a dumbest bill on this before, but there is new news of misgendering the elderly. First, we must explain what that means. Misgendering the elderly means that you intentionally call a transvestite 75-year-old a man, or you say sir, but you say sir intentionally when you should have said ma'am, as if you're supposed to know. And that would be an intentional misgendering. Believe it or not, in California, that's a law. That's a law. So in Bloomberg law, California's top court will review transgender elder care law. So the law passed, and now it has gone to California's top court. So California's Supreme Court will consider whether a law that prohibits long-term elder care workers from misgendering transgender residents is an illegal restriction on free speech, the justices announced Wednesday. Well, of course it is. In July, an appellate court in Sacramento revived a petition to block a provision of the Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Long-Term Care Facility Residents Bill of Rights, wow, that prohibits care workers from referring to residents by names or pronouns other than those chosen by the resident. That particular provision is a content-based restriction on free speech and isn't sufficiently narrowly tailored to justify the burden on long-term care providers, Justice Elena J. Duarte wrote for the California Court of Appeals, 3rd District. It restricts more speech than is necessary to achieve the state's interest in eliminating discrimination and mistreatment of LBGT seniors, Duarte said. The law criminalizes even occasional, isolated instances of willful misgendering. Jeez, I have to read this again. The law criminalizes even occasional, isolated instances of willful misgendering, without requiring that those instances amount to harassment or discriminatory conduct, Duarte wrote. The appellate court rejected California's argument that the rule is content neutral because employees can choose to refrain from using any pronouns at all to avoid misgendering. Well, I guess you would do that by calling the person by their name. So, yeah, you could say, you know, so Rachel, you know, for like Dr. Levine, you say Rachel instead of sir. So, but if you said sir, and even if like subconsciously you knew that you were calling Dr. Rachel Levine, who's a dude, sir, you were doing it intentionally, that would be, believe it or not, that would be a criminal act in the state of California, which is why this stupid law has gone to court and now is in the Supreme Court. The appellate court rejected California's argument that the rule is content neutral because employees can choose to refrain from using any pronouns, as I said. But a separate provision requiring gender-based room assignments to be made in accordance with a resident's gender identity doesn't violate the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment or the California Constitution, the court said. Transgender residents are similarly situated to non-transgender residents for room assignment purposes, and the provision doesn't provide special rights to transgender residents. California Supreme Court Justices Tani J. Canto-Sokoy, Carol A. Corrigan, Goodwin H. Liu, Leandra R. Kruger, Joshua P. Groban, and Martin J. Jenkins voted Wednesday to review the case but declined to depublish the lower court's opinion. Pending review, the third district's ruling may be cited not only for its persuasive value, but also for the limited purpose of establishing the existence of a conflict of authority, yada, yada, yada. So, basically, in California, the law is passed by this, I think, Senator Scott Wiener, appropriately named. So Senator Scott Wiener put a bill in, and the bill's purpose was to say, if you work in a long-term care nursing home and any of the long-term care residents are transvestites, or they're not transvestites, they instead just want to be referred to by a different gender or different pronouns, and you call them by what they appear to be, which is a guy as sir or mister, and you do that intentionally. How would they know that? But you do that intentionally, that would be considered abuse and therefore would be a criminal act. A criminal act. I mean, it's just unbelievable that you have a state that elects individuals like Scott Wiener as a state senator to pass bills that say you should go to jail by misgendering the elderly, when at the same time you have people pooping and peeing in public and shooting up drugs in public in San Francisco and massive homelessness. And yet this is what they're focused on. And it demonstrates to you the complete and utter decay of society when this is their priority. When this is their priority. Pronouns, ladies and gentlemen, pronouns. Making pronouns a criminal act because you used the wrong pronoun. And as I've said before, when we talked about this particular dumbest bill in America, you know the next step will be not just misgendering the elderly, but they're going to expand that to anyone who uses a misgender pronoun, anyone, not just for the elderly, would then potentially be engaging in a criminal act if they did it intentionally. Can you imagine? You go to court and you're like, well, how would you know it's intentional? Well, I know because he was smiling when he said it. Well, so what? So what? I mean, this is ridiculous. This is so obviously against the First Amendment. It's really stupid, folks. And we ought to just let this stuff, we have to just get rid of these people. We have to unelect people like Scott Wiener once and for all and have them focus and elect really serious politicians. So once again, misgendering the elderly. And that is the dumbest bill in America. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.